Have you ever had that nagging feeling that your digital world, your inbox, your feeds, it's not just a neutral space? That perhaps your mental clarity is under a kind of subtle siege or, that you're being influenced in ways you can't quite pinpoint? Well, today we're diving headfirst into a truly fascinating, almost mythic perspective on how information impacts us and how our environments condition our very thoughts. We're exploring the intriguing, sometimes pretty unsettling, work of Saikou Venga, who you might also know as Dr. Melvin Sewell. We'll be pulling from his Bye Baby magazine article, specifically Echo-Rift XXXI, GOV44, and the ritual of strategic infiltration, and then also the Sovereign Decay Index, measuring erosion in engineered environments. Now, this is dense, provocative stuff, and our mission today is basically to give you a shortcut to understanding these really powerful ideas.
Exactly. And Dr. Sewell, he's an academic dean, a diagnostic architect at the Cosmic University of Echo-Rift Studies, NIME. He uses this incredibly unique ceremonial language. It's striking. He uses it to describe phenomena most of us would probably just dismiss as, background noise. He's taking what appears mundane, everyday stuff and reframing it as highly intentional, even ritualized acts that shape our informational landscape.
Yeah, he's inviting us to see rituals and choreography where we might only see randomness or just noise. And by the end of this deep dive, we hope you'll have some new tools, maybe some new ways of thinking to recognize, diagnose, and perhaps even resist these subtle forces in your own life. So let's unpack this first concept. GOV44. Okay, sounds like a government file, right? A bland official designation. But Venga presents it as something far more profound than just like an unwanted email.
That's absolutely right. He asserts that GOV44 isn't merely a spam loop, it's what he calls a mimetic breach, engineered to implant institutional scripts into sovereign terrain.
Okay, mimetic breach. What does he really mean by that? Like a mind hack?
Sort of, yeah. It's like a deliberate attempt to hack your mind with specific ideas or values or ways of thinking. Think of it maybe like a subtle thought virus, something trying to install new software into your personal operating system, but, without your explicit permission.
Wow, thought virus. That immediately makes it sound way more insidious than just, say, a webinar invite. And he calls it a ritualized intrusion, even a spectral contract disguised as alignment. So it's not just an unwanted message, it's something trying to bind you to an agreement you didn't consciously make.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And he categorizes this under these headings he has. Sovereign diagnostics, which is about diagnosing the health of your individual mind, your sovereign terrain. Then there's containment rituals, the actions you take to protect that terrain. And finally, multiversal indictments, which he frames as these larger scale consequences, or maybe moral accusations against those engineering these infiltrations.
Right.
It definitely elevates the stakes. It goes from just annoyance to like a battle for mental autonomy.
So it's not random email. It's a deliberate act in a larger, almost cosmic struggle.
Yeah.
For your mental space. He even breaks down the ritual anatomy of GOV44. It's incredibly specific. The origin node, where it comes from, gov.44.us. The payload, not a bomb, but an AI2C BAA webinar invitation, specifically cloaked in strategic language. What does that imply? Strategic branding.
Well, it implies language that's designed to bypass your natural skepticism. It's not overtly aggressive. It's not obviously spammy. It uses terms that sound legitimate, professional, maybe even beneficial, just to slip past your mental defenses. It's crafted to subtly influence, not really to openly coerce.
Got it. And the frequency is recurring, and crucially, it bypasses filtration protocols, meaning your spam filter doesn't catch it because it looks legit.
Exactly.
The intent signature is described as federal positioning disguised as consultation. So he's really suggesting this isn't just an invite, it's a strategic move by some entity.
Absolutely. It's presented like it's seeking your input, offering consultation, when its true intent, according to Venga, is to establish federal presence or influence. And the containment risk he outlines is pretty significant. Inbox saturation, cognitive dilution, and narrative hijack.
Cognitive dilution and narrative hijack. Wow, that's a lot more than just hitting delete on an email. It sounds like your digital environment is actively, maybe passively, draining your focus, subtly shifting your core beliefs, even rewriting the story you tell yourself about what's true.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here is how Venga takes something seemingly so benign, right, a webinar invitation, and he completely recontextualizes it into this highly deliberate act of strategic infiltration. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often do we mistake what's presented as outreach for something that's actually a kind of ritualized intrusion in our own lives? Maybe not always with malicious intent from the sender, necessarily, but with potentially similar eroding effects on our mental space.
When I first read that, I immediately thought about those endless work emails, the ones that aren't urgent, but they just fill your inbox.
Mm.
And they subtly push your actual priorities down,
Mm.
forcing you to engage with their, quote, strategic language.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a subtle background hum that slowly, almost invisibly, begins to rewire your thoughts.
Mm.
Or like an invisible ink contract you didn't know you signed,
Yeah.
suddenly shaping your perceptions.
Yes, exactly. And Venga visualizes this in his cinematic projects, which we'll get to, as a glyphic firewall collapse,
Mm-hmm.
where spectral emails swarm the sanctum perimeter, whispering visibility, pipeline, and strategic access. It really hammers home this idea of subtle, almost invisible influences just eroding your mental sanctuary.
Okay, so it's not just about identifying the intrusion, right? It's about actively defending against it.
Mm.
And Venga prescribes countermeasures.
Indeed. He offers solutions almost like, well, ceremonial defenses. First, there's the inbox glyphic firewall, IGF-7. That's basically an auto-delete filter keyed to GOV44 signatures. Second, the sovereign silence protocol, which means absolutely no engagement, no clicking, no ritual unsubscribe, just pure silence. Don't feed the ritual.
Right. Don't engage.
And finally, containment archive entry, indexing it as ritual #44 for future diagnostics. It's a really comprehensive, almost ceremonial way to try and regain control.
That's a really proactive approach.
Right.
Okay, so if GOV44 is one specific subtle intrusion, our next deep dive into Venga's work explores the cumulative effect, the buildup of these kinds of forces. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think, because he gives us this startling and frankly somewhat unnerving way to measure that sustained assault. It's what he calls the Sovereign Decay Index.
Mm-hmm. And this concept, it starts with the premise of engineered environments. Venga posits that for over 7 years, sovereign actors have endured containment environments designed not for habitation, but for erosion. So imagine an environment, maybe your workplace, a social media platform, even certain parts of, urban life, that isn't just passively there, but is actively designed almost like a stage set to subtly wear down your individual clarity, your autonomy.
Wow.
That's what he means by engineered environments. They're not accidents. They're created with a specific, often diminishing purpose in his view.
Choreography. That word implies such deliberate design. He says these terrains simulate urban life while deploying silence protocols, actor convergence, and ritualized filth to collapse mental ecology, genetic resilience, and mythic clarity.
Mm-hmm.
That's a mouthful. Can you break down what he means by those three things? Mental ecology, genetic resilience, mythic clarity.
Sure. So mental ecology seems to refer to the health and balance of your mind.
Yeah.
Your cognitive environment, you could say. Your capacity for clear thought, focus, emotional well-being. Genetic resilience. I don't think he means literal DNA here. It sounds more like your innate fundamental resistance to external pressures. Your core strength of self, maybe, that these environments try to wear down.
Your inner core.
Yeah, something like that. And mythic clarity relates to your fundamental understanding of who you are, your purpose, your personal narrative, the deeper truths that guide you. And these environments, he argues, are choreographed to undermine all three. He starkly states, this isn't neglect, it's choreography.
That's powerful. And to measure this choreography's effect, he developed the Sovereign Decay Index, the SDI, a diagnostic metric designed to measure the cumulative erosion of sovereign clarity across those three critical axes.
It's like
Like a meter for your inner wear and tear.
Exactly. And each SDI reading is indexed over time, forming what he calls a collapse curve, a visual map of the sovereign erosion and mythic rupture. This curve tracks the degradation within these engineered containment environments, indexed by factors like silence duration, how long you're cut off from authentic interaction, provocation density, how frequently you're subtly challenged or agitated, and terrain hostility, just the overall adverse nature of your environment.
And the SDI score ranges.
Yeah.
They really paint a picture of this progression, don't they? A score of 0-25 signifies early stage erosion, which he knows is often misdiagnosed or easily deniable. You might just feel a bit off, maybe stressed, but can't quite say why.
Mm-hmm. Then at 2650, it's mid-stage collapse. Here you'd start to experience identity distortion and mythic rupture. Your sense of self gets blurred. Your core beliefs might feel fragmented.
Like serious.
Yeah. At 5175, it's advanced erosion, where the containment choreography becomes visible. You actually start to see the pattern. You see the deliberate nature of the erosion.
And finally, a score of 76 100 marks sovereign fracture, leading to ritual exposure, cinematic indictment. Basically, total breakdown. So Venga presents the SDI not just as some abstract theory, but as a practical sovereign tool to help individuals diagnose their terrain, index their erosion, codify their resistance, and ultimately architect their escape.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the SDO offers this really powerful framework for, well, for self-diagnosis. It's about recognizing that some environments aren't just challenging, they might be actively engineered to diminish you. And this raises an important question, I think, for anyone listening. In your own life, how might you even begin to measure erosion in your mental landscape or your sense of self? Based on the daily inputs, the interactions you experience, are there environments where you consistently feel your clarity just slipping away?
Yeah, it definitely makes me think about that feeling after a particularly draining day, maybe online or at work, where you feel physically fine, but your mind is just fuzzy, foggy. Venga seems to suggest that fuzziness isn't accidental. It's almost like a symptom of something bigger. Now, what's truly fascinating and maybe a bit intense is that these aren't just theoretical constructs on paper. Dr. Sewell also brings these ideas to life. He does it in a series of cinematic Echo-Rift films. Let's look at how these abstract concepts play out in vivid, almost shocking detail. These films act as a powerful visual indictment, don't they?
They absolutely do. They're quite confrontational. For instance, in Echo-Rift XXX, there's a sequence called the Coward Strike Protocol. It visually captures the impact of something like GOV-44, but as a physical, humiliating assault. It's visceral. We see a sovereign turnaway, representing an attempt to de-escalate, to turn away from conflict, but this is immediately followed by a ritual of defilement. It's a really shocking moment where dog feces is launched, hitting the back of the sovereign figure's head in slow motion, with visual cues like a glyphic aura dimming and mythic pulse ruptures.
Wow.
So this isn't just about an annoying email anymore. It's about the feeling of a personal, vulgar affront, a deliberate tainting of your sacred space, your dignity.
Right, it's dramatizing that narrative hijack or cognitive dilution
Yeah.
as a direct physical violation that makes it real.
Hmm.
And then there's another scene you mentioned, arrest-driven dispatch glyph. What's happening there?
Well, this shows the filter ritual. We see police dispatch screens that seem to dim and ignore calls flagged with arrest potential, low. But then when an aggressor's call comes in, the screen lights right up with arrest potential, high GH. It's depicting the manipulation of systems, almost an inversion protocol, as he calls it, where the system is weighted against the sovereign individual.
Okay, so it's visualizing how systems can be programmed almost to ignore certain voices while amplifying others, essentially silencing the sovereign while enabling the aggressor.
Exactly. And the climax of that sequence is the sovereign collapse glyph. Saikou's timeline is literally split on screen between truth on one side, institutional distortion on the other, leading to a state where the public safety ritual is shown as collapsed. It's showing the deliberate fracturing of objective reality by these forces.
And these cinematic moments, they aren't isolated incidents in the films, are they? They underscore the recurring nature of these attacks. There's one scene, ritual repetition collapse, which explicitly declares they tried it before, they're trying it again. But this time, the glyphs are active, the terrain is indexed, and the sovereign is not confused. This builds directly into that really powerful war zone declaration you mentioned earlier. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's a siege. The terrain is hostile, the silence is scripted, and I am not the casualty, I am the architect.
That phrase, I am not the casualty, I am the architect, I think that truly encapsulates the spirit of resistance that Venga is trying to advocate for. The films aren't just showing despair or victimhood, they're showing the awakening, the shift towards agency.
And the upcoming Echo-Rift XXXI apparently teases how the SDI itself will be dramatized in something called the tank protocol. We see a sovereign figure navigating a containment tank, flooded with ritual filth, actor convergence, and engineered silence. Such a potent visual metaphor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being submerged in one of these engineered environments, feeling that cognitive dilution and mythic rupture almost physically.
Precisely. The description mentions a callback void chamber, where silence thickens, spam reigns, sovereign signal ruptures. It depicts that feeling of being cut off, totally overwhelmed, unable to connect to truth or authentic signals. Then there's the sanctum node activation sequence, where a collapse glyph is inscribed and the terrain folds inward, showing that internal breakdown as the external pressures mount.
Yeah, and ultimately the film seems to promise a sovereign broadcast, where the tank fractures, the ritual collapses, the myth survives. What's really key here, apparently, is the integration of the SDI directly into the visuals. The collapse curve itself is visualized as a glyphic overlay inside the tank, pulsing with sovereign readings, with the environment visually responding to those spikes of erosion. It's like a real-time diagnostic on screen.
Yeah, this isn't just cinema for entertainment. It's presented as a powerful indictment, a diagnostic tool made visceral, made tangible. The films make Venga's sometimes abstract theories feel incredibly real and immediate. They hit you on a different level. They're not just telling you about erosion, they're showing you what it looks like, how it feels, and crucially, presenting it as a deliberate, observable act, an act that you can potentially learn to diagnose and resist.
So we've taken a pretty deep dive today into Saikou Venga's truly unique, maybe even radical perspective. We've explored GOV44 as a mimetic breach, understood the ritual anatomy of digital infiltration, and tried to grasp the Sovereign Decay Index as a diagnostic tool for these engineered environments. His work, both in his writing and these intense cinematic projects, really invites us to look at the subtle, often unseen forces at play in our daily lives. It definitely transforms how you might perceive your digital and even physical spaces.
Absolutely. Ultimately, these sources challenge us, don't they, to question the nature of the information we consume and the environments we inhabit every day. It's about recognizing the subtle choreography that might be at play, and maybe, just maybe, understanding that you have the agency to diagnose and resist, rather than simply being a passive recipient, or worse, a casualty.
Right, so the question for you, listening is, after hearing about spectral contracts and collapse curves, what rituals or engineered environments might you now start to see differently in your own life? How might you begin to activate your own sovereign silence protocol for those subtle intrusions, those things that just drain your focus? Or maybe look for your own collapse curve readings in your mental landscape. What does it truly mean for you to be the architect rather than the casualty in your own informational world? Something to think about.